The SCP Foundation specializes in tracking anomalous creatures, entities, or objects, and protecting mankind by keeping these anomalies contained. It doesn't happen very often, though, that an SCP surrenders itself to the Foundation, offering to be contained without putting up a fight. You might think that that would be a welcome change for the Foundation's personnel, getting an easy containment like that rather than having to devote valuable time, resources, and even lives to capturing an anomaly. But then you have to ask the obvious and worrying questions. How did this anomaly know where to find the Foundation so that it could turn itself in the first place? Did somebody send it? And if so, why? Well, don't worry. You don't need to try and imagine this scenario, because an SCP turning itself over to the Foundation under mysterious circumstances has actually already happened. One day, security personnel at an SCP Foundation containment site opened the front door to find an SCP just sitting there on the doorstep. The anomaly was brought in for questioning, and while it was soon designated SCP-032, it has sometimes been known by another name, Brother's Bride. SCP-032 is a person, or rather a replica of a person. Not a living statue that moves whenever you look away or a waxwork that comes to life when the sun goes down. No, this replica is far stranger. SCP-032 resembles a human woman around 30 years of age. Who made her, who she is supposed to resemble, and just where exactly she came from are all still questions the Foundation have been unable to answer. But what the research teams have been able to determine is what she is made from. Brother's Bride consists largely of plastics, at least the external portion of her body. Her skin is made from a combination of 5.5mm thick silicone and other plastic fiber polymers, all colored with a pigment to more closely mimic the shade of Caucasian human skin. SCP-032 has been referred to as a Type F human simulacrum by the Foundation, meaning that she has an imperfect outward resemblance to a human being, and the internal workings of her body are drastically different from an ordinary human's organs or central nervous system. What does SCP-032 have instead? Well, she lacks any skeleton or any of the other internal parts that make up a human body. Instead, her insides are entirely refined liquid oil. However, in spite of having no bones, no organs, and existing as just pure oil filling up a plastic skin, SCP-032 has no problem moving on her own or communicating verbally. When she was first discovered waiting outside the Foundation's Slovakian compound, Brother's Bride claimed that she had come there to be stored. SCP-032 is imperfect in how closely she resembles a human being, and this becomes more apparent the closer one gets to her. At a distance, she can maintain some illusion of appearing to be fully human. However, her appearance becomes less and less convincing as someone approaches. Naturally, the sight of an uncanny, rubbery, almost human is enough to unsettle someone, perhaps even cause discomfort. But this also happens to be unrelated to SCP-032's anomalous abilities, which she detailed to Foundation personnel when she was first contained. The Foundation security team that discovered SCP-032 patiently sitting and waiting to be found questioned her motives and how she had come to be there. There was no record of what time she might have arrived on the compound's security cameras, and SCP-032 gave the personnel no inkling as to how she knew the location of the Foundation's Slovakian site. Somehow, she'd managed to approach without being spotted by anyone, but would not explain how she had done so. Security personnel at the site were obviously skeptical and asked Brother's Bride why she had come to the Foundation. SCP-032 claimed that her creators had commanded her to, that she was to be placed in indefinite storage until claimed. Although the silicon-based woman appears to possess a normal level of cognitive function, she claims that she is not fully sapient, meaning SCP-032 does not possess the intelligence or understanding of other human beings, at least according to her. By her own admission, SCP-032 is an intermediary, acting on behalf of her creators, although the SCP Foundation has yet to be able to verify this. As for her anomalous abilities, SCP-032 was kind enough to detail these to the security personnel that first found her. She has an innate ability to influence any biological entity in her immediate vicinity. In other words, any organism that gets too close. Well, not quite any. There is a limitation to her power. SCP-032 can only affect a creature or organism not created by, related to, or influenced by humanity. So, plants, animals, even microorganisms like bacteria all fall into the category of things that SCP-032 has an effect on. According to the various tests the Foundation's researchers have conducted, the exact nature of how SCP-032's abilities work seems to vary, but her presence always causes massive and irreversible damage to an animal or organism's ability to exchange or use energy. For example, when SCP-032 is surrounded by wild flora, these plants will lose the ability to conduct the process of photosynthesis. They therefore can no longer produce or consume energy, preventing them from continued growth and ultimately causing death. In much the same vein, any animals that come into close contact with SCP-032 will find themselves unable to use their respiratory or digestive systems, rendering them unable to breathe oxygen or properly consume food. Not even germs and other microorganisms are safe from SCP-032's effects. Although when it comes to these microscopic life forms, her ability seems to focus solely on their reproductive systems, and if bacteria cannot divide itself, it cannot spread. At present, the SCP Foundation keeps Brothers Bride housed in an automated containment unit, restricting the amount of direct contact personnel can have with her. Unless they are there to conduct authorized experiments or other necessary research-related tasks, staff are to leave SCP-032 alone. Any interviews with her are not even carried out in person, and instead researchers use a remote communication array to ask SCP-032 more about her origin, her creators, and her abilities. This probably seems a little overcautious, right? After all, SCP-032 has no effect on the human body, and isn't aggressive or outwardly hostile. Maybe locking her in a room is excessive, but remember, her degenerative abilities do affect microorganisms and bacteria, even those that are beneficial to human beings. The human body is full of good bacteria that aids with digestion and helps the body absorb nutrients, like the ones you've heard about in ads for probiotic yogurt. Since 032's effects don't discriminate between good and bad bacteria, people have to keep their distance from SCP-032, or else they might find that they can no longer digest food properly. In fact, no biological material is allowed anywhere near her. No houseplants, no pets, nothing. Oddly, SCP-032 herself seems fine with this, and has never expressed any desire for any form of comfort, and does not appear to require sustenance like food or water. Shortly after she was first contained by the SCP Foundation, SCP-032 was interviewed by Dr. Alexander Kovac, the resident psychologist at the site where Brothers Bride was discovered. Dr. Kovac initially tried to ask SCP-032 to disclose her name. However, she was unable to do so. "I don't have one. People have names. I'm not one." She then went on to explain that even her creators had no name for her, and that she was instructed to cooperate with the SCP Foundation. Dr. Kovac pressed on, asking about when she told security that she was to be stored until collected, who SCP-032 had meant was coming to collect her. Her answer was as enigmatic as could be expected. She claimed that she was going to be collected by someone her creators wished to torment, and finding her in the hands of the SCP Foundation would bring this person greater suffering. Kovac asked if this person was part of the Foundation, assuming that SCP-032's creators had some kind of animosity towards a particular member of personnel, and that 032 was part of some kind of revenge plot against a member of Foundation's staff. SCP-032 denied this though, stating, "He is not one of you, merely a one-time sympathizer of sorts. He believes you tried to help him once, and if he is forced here, if he finds me here, you will die. That will hurt him. They have no interest in any of you or your organization. You are here as a tool, just as I am." According to SCP-032, the man coming to collect her was a prideful, complacent figure who won when he should have lost. Somehow this individual had apparently been punished by being forced to live in exile from his kin and wander the world endlessly, destroying anything in his path, yet unwillingly. His very presence would poison human beings, leaving this man trapped in eternal solitude, tormented by the weight of his guilty conscience. SCP-032 described the man's punishment as a masterwork of torment. She described her purpose in being sent to the Foundation as being to act as this man's last undoing. Apparently, this wanderer would occasionally find solace in looking at nature and find hope in the world around him. Her ability to destroy the organisms around her would be a way to break this man's will and the final nail in the proverbial coffin. Apparently, SCP-032's appearance was also seemingly meant to deceive him. She stated that the man would recognize her and this would remind him of fond memories. But then as he got closer, he would see SCP-032 for what she really was, a crude replica of a human being, reminding this man that her likeness would be forever out of his reach. SCP-032 was intended by her creators to be as artificial as the wandering man's hope, and when he eventually found her, either in a day, a month, or in a century, she would destroy his very last source of solace. At the conclusion of the interview, Dr. Kovac asked why this man would recognize her, and SCP-032 simply replied, "I used to be his wife." If we take SCP-032 at her word, then it appears she was created with the intention of being used to torment this wandering man and act as a final punishment for him. In another interview 6 months after her initial containment, SCP-032 expressed a hatred for the man's wife whom she was made to resemble. Sent in to assess SCP-032's cognitive abilities and personality, or lack of, Dr. Kovac questioned this. SCP-032 had always been adamant that she had no conscious thoughts or feelings of her own, and when challenged by the doctor, she claimed that she hated her mold because her creators wanted her to. The first thing SCP-032's creators had done after making her was show her the wife of the man they hoped to torment. It is unclear whether SCP-032 was shown photographs or the actual woman she had been molded from. Not an easy task, as this woman, the wife, was apparently long dead. But the creators had risked disturbing the wife's final rest, just to show her to SCP-032. She was beautiful, so peaceful, serene, whole, even gone, even dead. I could see the essence of who she used to be, of who she still was and forever will be, her soul. They told me she didn't get to live for all that long, but when she lived, she was herself. She was alive, and so I hated her. In the wife's face, SCP-032 saw a reflection of herself and realized that she had been made just to be a mockery, a parody of a living human being existing only to cause misery to the wandering man who would one day find her. Instead of skin, she had molded silicone and plastic synthetic fiber in place of hair, and oil for blood. But what SCP-032 lacked, she realized, was a soul. This was all part of the brothers' design, according to SCP-032. When the man found her, he would see not only what had been done to the memory of his wife, but he'd also see how much SCP-032 hated her, and hated herself for not being alive the same way the wife had been. The goal of all of this, to make the man realize that he never won. SCP-032 herself is a mystery, but perhaps the real question is, who do you think this man is, and what was it he didn't win? But that's a story for another day. Let us know what you think down in the comments. Now go check out SCP-5545 Mysterious Tunnels in Antarctica Abnormality and SCP-1730 What Happened to Site-13 The Full Story Compilation for more of the most mysterious SCPs.